Hey, so I just thought I'd go through some of the kind of banana skins with FMOD and some of the common kind of things that happen. So starting off with making a sound, and I've just made the processor sound here. I've just quickly duplicated it from another one and pitch shifted it down and given it a bit of a different tonality. But I just want to kind of show you that when you go ahead and build using F7 from FMOD, whether Unreal is open or not, it will go ahead and create some pending files that need to be pushed on source control. The thing is though, unless you restart Unreal, you're not going to have the asset lookup file generate. So let me just show you what that looks like. I'm just going to launch Unreal now, and keeping SmartGit in focus, you'll see an asset lookup file generate here. So this is the number one kind of thing to watch out for, because this will happen for other people if you push these files to the repository without reloading Unreal and including the asset lookup in this push. It's going to cause other people to have that file appear, and it's going to confuse them. So I'm just going to wait for this to generate. I'm just going to get this ready, and I'll push that. Just give it another second. So while that's loading, I'll just mention that the general approach is to copy, maybe duplicate audio events rather than creating something from scratch. It is good to duplicate them and then change the source files, because there'll be some envelopes that, for example, this one, the pitch goes down and it's got a little 2-second fade out as well to correspond with that. They should all be the same in terms of these are all the power machines. So if I just so you can search for something, and then if you cross out the search after you've selected it, you'll still be able to see it relative to the other events. So there's all the power stuff, quite a lot of stuff, and they all have the same thing. So generally speaking, it's a good idea to duplicate and rename before you build. Don't build until you've got it more or less how you want it. And then if I go back to SmartGit now, you'll see the asset lookup has now been generated. So this is when I would then say processor sounds. So that's a better habit to get into. So I'm just going to push that, and you can see the U asset is generated as well as the asset lookup. So that's an important step. And I just want to cover a few other kind of little things as well. In FMOD, if I just go, I'm in my events tab, which is the main view of all the audio. So everything you see here that is assigned, in other words, it doesn't have an unassigned tag. This should appear in Unreal. And some of these little power sounds have a little offset, because otherwise it's a bit too much when they compete with other sounds at the same time and everything turns on together. So usually there's a logic behind everything. The main machine sounds have this kind of looping behavior. They've got a special on and off sound, but the loop will complete when the event stops. And this is a very common way of basically having a sound loop until the sound is told to stop. And then this transition region is set to stopping, which means it will activate on stopping, and then it will force the event to the marker, to the end. But FMOD is very much in control of what you're hearing when the event ends. So even though we're getting the stop command, we're pushing to a marker on stop, so we get a special stop sound. So that's how you kind of make a special stop sound in FMOD without needing a stop sound per se hooked in from code. But I just wanted to show the root directory. If I just collapse everything just so that you can see the kind of home screen, if you like, which is the events all fairly tidy. I've got a couple of warnings, and I should probably explain what they are. Downgrading an event to a nested event, or deleting an event or renaming an event, will leave a UAsset file in Unreal, and that's going to be problematic. So you have to delete the event from Unreal and make sure it's gone, and then delete or rename or downgrade the file in FMOD, and then when you build the bank, it should not reappear in Unreal. If it does, something's not right. But yeah, deleting or renaming an event, which is effectively like deleting it, it will cause a warning in Unreal saying, you know, where's the event. So make sure you delete it from Unreal. The best thing to do is actually make sure it's got no references in Unreal before deleting it. So I'm just going to ignore that and just going to launch it straight away just so I can show you more quickly how to do that in Unreal. All the FMOD events in Unreal are searchable by using the word FMOD, so that's great. So you can find things fairly easily, and then it's just a right click on the event in Unreal and you can say find references and you get the standard reference tree in Unreal, and then it's just a case of making sure that the event is not selected in all of those places where it's referencing. So you can do that by selecting another event or just clearing it completely, and then you should be able to delete an event in Unreal without causing any problems. But if you delete it while it's being referenced or being used, in other words, that's not good. So yeah, that's the first thing. So let me show you what that looks like. If I just say FMOD pistol, otherwise known as the vendor, so right click, reference viewer, and there we go. So yeah, it should only be referencing where it's being used. Sometimes you might see some legacy blueprints here, but I try and keep that down. And if I edit that, you'll see the vendor blueprint and there's a fire sound for the pistol. So if I was to clear that or select something else, then I can go back here and then press delete, and then make sure in FMOD that it's either deleted or another way of deleting it would be just unassigning it from the bank. So here's some test sounds that are assigned. I could just say remove from bank. Yeah, another one, never interrupt a saving FMOD project. Once you press save, or if you change your mind or anything like that, just let it save and then delete whatever you've saved and then resave it. But FMOD doesn't really like when you interrupt the save, so watch out for that one. I've mentioned about references. If deleting, moving, renaming is kind of like the first point. Just make sure there's no references before you do anything. Unreal open when building, yeah, I mentioned that already. So yeah, just a very quick overview on the FMOD project. I've got some test files here. They should probably be in a test folder, but they're not. Sorry about that. Anything unassigned, you should be able to just delete, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect anything in Unreal. So those are just some older files that we don't need, so I can actually save that. And yeah, so these are unused. These are circuit sounds that I took in from TerraTech, and just in case you wanted some little sounds to play with, they're all unassigned, so that could also be deleted. Combat, self-explanatory. These are the sounds where it's kind of like the tech vocalizing that it's being hit. And as with FMOD, everything in FMOD, the first tab that you see is a timeline tab. So you get this linear. I can actually press play. Oh, I've got multiple desktop audios coming through. Sorry, my OBS isn't quite set up properly, so that might have been quite loud. Sorry. But yeah, a very simple event there. It's just going to choose randomly. This is called a multi-instrument type of instrument. There's different instrument types, so if you right click, you've got all the main options, but if you drag sounds in, usually FMOD knows what you're doing and it will make the right instrument container type for you, so it's very intuitive. The parameter tabs, they can affect the sound either by adding automation here, or what you can do is you could actually click on the instrument itself, and then you can add on automation here. It's the same, but here it's better used as more of a condition. So you can say it's not going to play until that parameter criteria is met. So it's effectively adding a parameter to it, but if you want that full control in terms of drawing in keyframes, it's kind of easier to do it on the actual parameter sheets. And like I said before, FMOD doesn't really make it obvious that this is the main kind of linear timeline, and these are actually parameter tabs. But every tab that's not timeline is a parameter tab, so effectively it's for keyframing, and you can keyframe a lot of different things, volume, pitch, just right click. But like I say, you can stack them as conditions, and you can actually have a combination of conditions, and you can say they all have to be satisfied or just one of them has to be satisfied. And yeah, pitch modulation is really nice. So you can right click, and I mean you can automate pitch with a parameter, but I like to use pitch as an ADS or modulator, because this is actually a linear, it's not linked to a parameter, it's just a linear way of modulating the pitch. So the pitch will always follow this shape every time it's played. And that's quite useful because you can just get some nice results just by doing that with the pre-existing sound. You can repurpose sounds by playing with their pitch. And you can even do it with the volume, which is actually really good. If a sound has a pop or something's not right, you want to smoothen it out, you can add in some volume ADSR as well, and you'll see that kind of shape a lot where I want something to kind of fade in quickly and fade out pretty quickly as well. So this is just a whistle stop tour. I'll just keep going. All the environmental sounds are in here. Ambient main is the main one. You're going to see lots of referenced or child events, trees and all the kind of ambient stuff here, but the main one is there, and it's quite a busy one. Now I do have all of the actual biome sounds specifically are in another folder called Atmos. So these are all the biome sounds specifically. And I've got different ones for day, for night, etc. But they all more or less live on this main page. Excuse me, I've got quite a cold at the moment. So this is a sustain point, much like a loop region. You can make these loop regions and it'll just loop. And the thing is that a lot of the time sounds are asynchronous, or they're child sounds in a parent event, which means it's not going to loop the sound as you see the loop point here, but it's going to do so within a kind of nested way. So an asynchronous sound will be triggered, and you can see here the sound will be told to start playing at a random offset position, and it's looping as it wants to, independent of where the playhead cursor is. So if I press stop here, that cursor should eventually stop the event, but it's not doing it here. Or maybe because I don't have an instruction here. That should force it to stop, which is interesting, but maybe because the sustain point doesn't have a stop condition. But I'm not going to change that because it works fine, and because the event destroys itself when the level stops loading. So I'm going to go through the big beefy events separately. I just want to give a really quick overview here. The music event also has a main event that has child references. That's because they have a kind of hierarchy, and the music is set up in a sort of special way, I suppose. I used to have it way more complicated, but it's been simplified. But essentially, it gives you more control to have a kind of parent event, and the child events are managed here, and they can change on the timeline depending on the parameters and aggro mass and all these different things like danger. But essentially, they're all appearing like this in the parent event just to keep them all in order. There's some kind of one-shot music events as well in there as well. And you kind of get the idea. Everything should be organized. Physics sounds, power sounds. A lot of these are very similar, but it's just to give the different machines different flavors. I think the ones that are red are the main ones that are in game. There's a lot of other ones that I don't know if they're being used. I think the ones that are red are definitely in use. There's not that many that aren't, so there might be some spare sounds there, but they're mostly bespoke designs. There's a couple that are repurposed because they're just quite similar, so there was not much point in designing its own sound, but they're mostly customized. Resource sounds. There's obviously tech sounds for building, driving. This is the main one, the SFX car engine. And like I explained before, most of the sounds are on the speed tab here. Well, it kind of layers them all up like that, but actually they're all different samples that are selected based upon, if I select based upon the speed, because it's on the speed tab, and also there's a couple of qualifiers, so it needs the prop boat mass to be 1 and the throttle boat needs to be 1 for this prop throttle boat go sound to play. And there is automation on it as well. You can kind of get a summary of that down here, and you can flick between tabs if it has multiple. Or you can go like fishing in the different parameter tabs and you can find what's going on. The fact is I try and keep everything on the main timeline or the probably the primary parameter, which is speed in this case. But it's very common that you just need to put sounds on individual parameters a lot of the time, and this is a classic case of that. The surface parameter tab is really full of surface sounds. So yeah, that's a beefy one. But I'll do a separate little video on that one. And just to show you as well that what I do here is I just copy the name of that, and I sometimes just delete the AI one, and I right click and duplicate the main car engine after I've made changes, that is, and it appears there and it names itself 2, but I then go ahead and paste the actual name and I reassign it to sound effects, and that is how I roll over changes that I've done to from the car engine to the AI, because they're actually controlling themselves separately. Another better way of saying that would be they're going through their own mixer buses. Let me just see. Yeah, there's an AI group, and there was a reason why that gets ducked. I think it's to do with the resources. These are all snapshots, so I think it might be to do with, let's see. There is a reason for that. It's to do, I think, with identifying enemy vehicles, like listening to them when you're scanning for resources or something like that. But I can't see it right now. But there may be another reason for that in the future. So it is probably best to keep those as separate events. So once you've done that, you can actually just rebuild. And in Unreal, just to make sure it doesn't get confused with metadata references, you could just wait a few seconds for the build to be updated, and then you can right click on the FMOD folder and say update redirector references, just to make sure that there's no confusion about what the metadata is on that tech AI engine event, the SFX car engine AI. So moving onwards, there's some special sounds here that don't really fit into other clean categories, like just special tech sounds that grew over time. They're not quite weapons, they're not quite physics sounds, but they're just general techie sounds. UI sounds, there's quite a lot of those, and it's changed over the last 2 years quite a bit, but this is what's going on right now. All the unassigned ones, they can be deleted. They might be useful in some ways, if any of them are appropriate, but I suspect it's best to design new sounds. And the main difference with UI sounds is that they're very simple, and there's no spatializer on the master track because these are 2D sounds, so they don't actually position in the world, so they don't need that spatializer. And that's the main difference there. Utility, that technically is a UI sound. I might move those. I'll just see if there's any reason why they're going there, but utility should just be for special things like spatial snapshots. So whenever you see a red event like this, that's the kind of snapshot that's engaging, and a snapshot is essentially when the mixer goes into a different configuration. So if you look at the mixer normally, it's on the main mixer mode, and for example, these convolution reverb faders will be down, but if I click let's say desert, you'll see one of them will just come up to give a bit of convolution to the desert, for example. So these are different snapshots, and there's a hierarchy from top to bottom. Yeah, weapons is a big one. All your weapon sounds are in there, and there's going to be different kind of events going on, but the main configuration is that you're going to see 2, and amplify is going to control which track is actually turned up, and it's also going to qualify out the event so it doesn't play the 2 events together. That would be a waste of voice count. So amplify controls which of the voices is actually playing, and there are some that have that one's not assigned, that must be an old minigun. If you look at some of them, there's a bit more going on with the minigun, for example, and there's 2 there because it has a mod prop as well. So some of them loop, and then until the event is told to stop, it's not going to release. But yeah, that's essentially it. I think I'll probably do a couple of separate videos if I have time, and I'm going to look at these sounds because they probably shouldn't be there. Anything that you see bypassed, it was in use before, and I took it off because maybe it was causing strange behavior when you fly or something like that. But yeah, events generally are capped at around 3 or so max instances, unless you're talking about special events like the tech engine and such, and it needs more. Most of them are set stealing to quietest. Animations have been problematic in the past, so if we just select an animation here, I can find these easily because I've put anim at the end of most animations. They should all, let's see, be set to stealing. You might see some command instruments as well. So this is saying, hey, stop the moving when it fires. When the sound shock fires, it's going to stop the movement sound, make sure that that's not overlapping. So that's what that is. Cooldown is sometimes used to make sure that you're not hearing loud sounds pile up on each other, because that can be overwhelming. I think stealing is set to quietest for all these, which means as you move the camera around 10 puffballs, it's going to select the loudest 3, and all the other ones will be temporarily put into a dormant state. Sorry, I mean not heard at all. A dormant state would be if they were virtualized stealing, but quietest just mutes them all except for the loudest 3, whereas virtualized keeps the other 7 dormant in case they need to re-engage at a specific point. For example, like an enemy engine that would go out of range and it would come back on as they drive away from you and then closer to you. But yeah, that's just a really quick tour of how the project is set up. And don't forget that you can use the project bin as well. There's different windows in FMOD, and this one, for example, allows you to search all the audio files that have been used in the entire project. You can see I've got some test sounds, and then it goes into all the individual sounds, and there's an absolute ton of sounds in there. And the banks, I should say that the folders in the events tab correspond to just general kind of housekeeping, but it is important because you can't move a built sound. Once you have a sound built and assigned, you can't move it afterwards because it'll break the reference if you're doing it with code especially. But yeah, just try and keep everything in the pre-existing structure. And for banks, it just builds them to separate banks, and the reason for that is if you need to make changes to a bank, let's say the ambience, it'll just change the ambience bank so that the player doesn't have to download like the whole load of banks again. It just keeps updates kind of bite-sized, if you like, and there's a separate event, a bank for the ambient main event because it's such a big event. So that's kind of like its own structure, its own folder, and that's why it's good to duplicate sounds, because they should go to the corresponding bank. And assets, that's just the same as the control 3 that I did. So I'm going to stop this. I'm going to make a couple of more recordings.